SBIR and STTR data protection is one of the most unique and important protections accorded Small Business Innovation Research, or SBIR, and Small Business Technology Transfer Research, STTR firms. These protections apply to all phases of the SBIR and STTR programs. Now, please note that throughout the balance of this discussion, I may sometimes reference only SBIR, but that is for convenience only. Everything that I mention applies equally to the STTR program as well. One of the most important of these protections is that the government cannot disclose SBIR data outside of the government. The government receives a limited, non-exclusive license or right to use SBIR data, but such use cannot include disclosing it in any way. This non-disclosure obligation is accompanied by a data rights protection period. In its May 2nd, 2019 SBIR STTR policy directive, SBA changed the data rights protection period for both SBIR and STTR funding agreements to a uniform 20-year period that begins on the date of award. This start date for the protection period is new, as is the 20-year period. The protection period no longer begins on the date of delivery of the last funding agreement deliverable. In exchange for the grant of the 20-year protection period, SBA eliminated the extension or rollover provision effective May 2nd, 2019. Thus, subsequent SBIR and STTR funding agreements no longer extend data protection periods for prior awards to the end of the protection period that applies to the current award. The 20-year protection period applies both to SBIR and STTR awards. Keep in mind that a Phase 3 award is by definition not paid for with Phase 1 or 2 SBIR STTR funding. To get the most out of your participation in the SBIR program, it is important that you realign your marketing schedule to the new 20-year protection period for each award. These SBIR STTR data rights protections have many implications. First and foremost, this non-disclosure obligation means that the government cannot compete technologies containing SBIR data. Any such competition would mean disclosing the SBIR data in solicitations, which the government cannot do. This unique right also underlies and supports the sole source Phase 3 mandate, the requirement to award Phase 3 awards to the SBIR developing firm to the greatest extent practicable. This single right and obligation of the government creates value in the SBIR firm and ultimately wealth for the SBIR owners. Because of the importance of SBIR STTR data in the new program, it is vital for small businesses to understand the nature of SBIR data and how to protect it. It is important to understand what SBIR data is as well as what it is not, so that SBIR owners and their employees can better protect their technologies and SBIR data. As we go through this analysis, one can quickly see that the SBA directive treats SBIR and STTR data alike. SBIR and STTR data have three basic attributes. It is recorded information, secondly, of a technical nature, and third, generated under an SBIR or STTR funding agreement, and appropriately marked with the SBIR STTR data rights legend. We use the term funding agreement because SBIR awards can be grants, contracts, cooperative agreements, or any other type of funding award the government chooses to make. So we're going to talk about recorded information, that's technical in nature and that is generated under an SBIR or STTR funding agreement and, of course, appropriately marked. Let's take a look at each of these elements. First, SBIR, STTR data must be recorded information. That is, SBIR data must be reduced to a writing and contained in a written document. SBIR data can be source code, sketches, drawings, formulas, equations, reports, descriptions of SBIR technologies, SBIR final reports, and any other type of writing that meets all three of these criteria. SBIR data protections, however, do not apply to ideas or concepts unless those ideas or concepts are reduced to writing. SBIR data protections protect the ideas contained, however, in a written document, but not the idea itself without the writing. In order to protect an idea or concept outside of the written description of it, one must resort to patent protection. Thus, the non-disclosure protection does not protect ideas or concepts by themselves. In general, most SBIR, STTR firms protect software and source code through this non-disclosure obligation because they do not wish to disclose their software architecture or actual source code in a patent. Second, SBIR data must be technical in nature. Non-technical data does not qualify as SBIR data. Cost and pricing information is a good example. This data is protected by the Freedom of Information Act, paragraph B4, which constitutes an exception to mandatory disclosure of information by the government. It also can be subject to and protected by the Privacy Act. But the SBIR non-disclosure obligation of the government does not extend to such information. Such proprietary information is protected by these other means. Other non-technical information, such as background data on the company, is also not protected and should be disclosed carefully and with that knowledge in mind. The test for this technical requirement is that it must relate somehow to the SBIR technology being developed in phases 1, 2, and 3. Therefore, this SBIR data will be something that the SBIR firm will seek to protect at any rate. Information or data that the SBIR firm advertises on its website is not something it feels it must protect. This could include general information of its SBIR technologies that do not give up trade secret information about the technology. Third, SBIR data must be generated under an SBIR or STTR funding agreement. Proprietary data that the firm developed with its own private funds is not SBIR data. It was not developed under an SBIR award. It is protected by other means as described above. Proposal information is also not SBIR data, although the proposal may contain SBIR data that was generated under prior SBIR funding agreements and is protected under those agreements. Different laws and regulations protect proposal information